Welcome to Childcare Rockstar Radio. I am your host, Kris Murray. Childcare leaders around the globe are breaking through challenges, leading the way in innovation, testing new best practices, and impacting children and families in a much more powerful and positive way than ever before. Each week, join me for interviews with early childhood leaders and experts that will leave you inspired to become the next childcare rockstar. Now, let's go. This is Childcare Rockstar Radio, episode 160, featuring Allyx Schiavone. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm thrilled to have you. This is Kris Murray, and I'm really excited for this one, guys. This could potentially be the most important episode that I've ever done on the podcast. That's a big statement. Well, Miss Allyx Schiavone blew me away. Our conversation hit so many important points of, we had statistics shared, and we were discussing the whole future of our industry, essentially. And so the reason why it's so important for you to listen to this episode, guys, is because we all need to pitch in and work together to do our part, to reach out and essentially save the childcare industry. It's that dire. When you listen to what Allyx has to share in this episode, the statistics that she talks about, they blew me away, and I'm sure that they'll have a huge impact on your thinking and potentially on your awareness. I mean, I know that we all know the crisis that we're in, right? From making care affordable for families and not continuing to pass along rate increases to them, but also trying to provide our teachers with a living wage and make a few points of profit at the end of the day if you're a for-profit school. And if you're non-for-profit, just keeping the lights on. And so doing that in the face of all the expense increases with inflation that we've had, but not passing those, costs on to parents. The most, I think, alarming statistic that Allyx shares in this episode is that right now, the average family who is in childcare with one or more children, on average, is spending 27% of their household income on childcare. 27%. So just let that sink in. That's on the average in the United States. Now, if you're outside of the States and you're listening to this, it would be worthwhile for you to work with your governments and your reporting agencies to get the stat. What we're trying to do is reduce the cost to 7%. So the theme is 27% to 7%. And in fact, that's the title of this episode. And I was trying to really hard to decide the title of this episode because there were so many important themes and facts and stats that were shared and discussed. But 27 to 7, guys, is where we'd like to take it if we're going to have any hope of providing childcare to everybody that needs it in this country and continuing to support the dual income workforce of men and women in this country. So that's some of the things that we talk about. A little bit about Allyx. She's the executive director of the Friends Center for Children, and she's spent 30 years in the field of early learning. She's never done anything else in her career. She's also the chairperson of the Childcare for Connecticut's Future Coalition. So she's working as an advocate as well as working as a day-to-day director in her center in the trenches, just like y'all. So I think you're going to really enjoy this powerful and very important conversation. Got to let you know that this episode is sponsored in part by the Childcare Success Academy. If you're a fan of this show, you know the powerful transformations that ECE business owners and their leadership teams achieve as being a member of the Academy. It's the world's first, best, and largest coaching organization exclusively for childcare leaders. The Academy is currently accepting new applications for a limited time. A childcare business coach is standing by right now, so take that first baby step by booking your free call today, and we'd love to have a chat. You can go to childcaresuccess.com and click on book a strategy session. There's several green buttons on the page at childcaresuccess.com. Find one and click it. It's free. There's no obligation, and a stronger business and a better, happier life is waiting for you on the other side. And I look forward to working with you personally as well. So we're going to dive into the episode here. Without any further ado, it's just so important for us to all think about what we want to do, our baby steps of action out of listening to this episode. We are fighting for disruption, and we must be part of the disruption. The forces to get the people that are at the table making the laws in this country and the decision makers to actually stand up and pay attention to us. And so I'm going to invite you today and strongly, strongly ask you to do me a favor and take action based on what you hear in this episode. And I'm very, very proud to be part of this message to help save the childcare industry and provide our most beloved teachers who've been, the ones that are the tried and true ones that show up every day and do the work. You know, the ones I'm talking about, that were with you through the pandemic and that are exhausted and have dealt with stress and anxiety, but they're still showing up every day. Those are the ones that we want to provide a living wage to. We also talk about incredibly creative, affordable housing solutions that Allyx has actually implemented that you can learn from and potentially model and implement as well. Just incredible stuff is shared, guys. I can't even. And let's all join forces and take some action on this, okay? All right, enjoy the episode and let's go. Welcome back, folks. I am thrilled that you're here today. I have a great guest queued up for today's episode. Her name is Allyx Schiavone, and Allyx is the executive director of the Friends Center for Children and the chair of the Childcare for Connecticut's Future Coalition. Allyx, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Thanks for having me here, Kris. I'm excited to speak with you.
I'm thrilled that you're here as well. I think this is going to be a great conversation. So I mentioned Connecticut, so I'm assuming that is where you're sitting right now, but tell us
Yes,
more.
exactly. I'm in New Haven, Connecticut. That is where I call home.
Okay. Great town, and happens to also be the home of Yale University.
It does.
Cool.
As a fourth generation New Havener, though, I'm a townie. So
yeah, cool. Yeah, that's a long heritage in the great state of Connecticut.
Yep.
So tell us more about your background relative to the early learning, early childhood industry, or just children, the welfare of children in general. Tell us more.
Yeah. So I'll let you start with just my age because I'm 53. So it matters in terms of the story. I've never had a job that is a double negative that wasn't working with children. So I've worked with children my whole adult life.
Wow.
It's really been for me, I've been devoted to teaching and supporting children, their families, and their teachers. And it sounds really cliche, but I just love it. I mean, I get to be in partnership with amazing professionals and families. And of course, these amazing, eager, joyful, honest, developing human. What could be better?
Honestly, completely agree with you. Yeah, I'm so fulfilled by the work that I do as well, Allyx, and I'm sure that you are as well. It's very fulfilling journey to be on. Yeah. So what does the Friends Center for Children actually do? What is your mission? What are you trying to accomplish?
Yeah. So we are an early care and education program. We serve children ages 3 months to 5 years, their families and their teachers. Our mission really drives our work, and our mission is educate children, empower families, inspire teachers, engage community, embrace diversity, and embody equity. Really wonderful things, right? How can we go wrong, right? We love that, and what guides our work are our values. And so we are a Quaker based organization, which means we are rooted in these values, and the values are simplicity, peace, integrity, community, equity, and stewardship. So those guide our daily lives, and we really try to live those values in our interactions. And what that really means for us is that we are less transactional and more relationship. And a lot of us in the early care and education field are relationship based when it comes to the children and families, because that is the nature of our work. And we try to adopt that same mentality in terms of even the like payroll side or the admission side. I mean, it really becomes all about relationships. We have to have transactions, as you know, in our industry, but we try to really think about the relationship and the human part of it. I will say, it makes things longer, right? If you shift from transaction to relationship, a 2-minute thing becomes a 30-minute thing.
Right.
So there is that side of it, but the trust that we can build with our community is really strong because of that relationship based focus.
So how many children and or families are you serving right now?
Yeah, so currently we serve 122 children across 2 sites. We're in a growth phase, and by 2027, will be opening two on other sites. So we'll serve about 275 children.
Okay.
We serve children from a wide variety of socioeconomic ranges. It's really part of our mission. We're a mission driven organization. So that means we make decisions that sometimes cause us to do more work in another area, such as admissions. If we're going to accept families who, on a sliding scale basis, it means we have to find funds in other ways, right? So
Hmm.
we do a lot of fundraising. We work with our legislators a lot. We do a lot of state work to get state bonds and state funds coming into our program. So
And I'm thinking and making an assumption that might be wrong that you are a nonprofit or a non-for-profit.
yes, we
Is
are
that
a
accurate?
not-for-profit. We are
Okay.
absolutely not-for-profit.
Okay.
Um, and that really speaks again to our Quaker values and sort of the baseline. But we run our organization in a similar format that for-profit would, meaning our quality and really as the child is the center and the client is our family unit and all of that.
Hmm. So as a proportion of the families that you're serving, what percentage are coming from households that need a little bit of extra support? Either they're on either
Yeah,
funding program,
yeah.
subsidy, or underserved communities.
So the majority, honestly. So we
Okay.
have it's a sliding scale, but if you look at it, we really look at it a third, and a third in terms of socioeconomic breakdown. So a third of our families would be considered, upper middle class. A third would be middle class, and a third would be families who are, underserved, under resourced.
Hmm. Hmm.
And we also really attempt to, and the reason we do this, I should say, it's really intentional because that's what New Haven is. So we're looking to
Okay.
mirror the community that we live in.
Yeah.
And we also do that with regard to ethnicity and race. So New Haven is very diverse and it has really a third Caucasian, a third Latinx, and a third African American.
Hmm.
Have that same racial and ethnic breakdown in our program and in our teachers.
I love that. I love the
Yeah.
diversity that is very much what I live and breathe, and
Yeah.
I love that. I'm drawn to that. Tell us more about what is the Childcare for Connecticut's Future Coalition? What goes on there? And just tell us a
Yeah.
little bit more about that.
Yes. Well, I think in order to, I mean, to talk about the coalition, we need to talk about the state of the industry, right? And this is,
Right. And that's what we're
we
going to
all
do
know,
today.
yeah, that's where we all are, right? There's
Yeah.
a real access and affordability crisis in early care and education. And these challenges that are systemic require systemic solutions. So as a program, we can't solve the system. We work around the system, as most of us do in the field.
Yes.
And we are really fighting at the coalition level. And I use that word fighting because it feels like that a lot of the time,
Yep.
right? We're fighting for disruption in what is currently being done. So currently we have like half measures or stopgaps, quick fixes. We saw that through COVID and like the ARPA funds and these things that
Mhm.
they pushed out that didn't solve the system. They just sort of put a band-aid on the crises that we were managing.
That's right.
So the coalition is really focused on transformational change for the state of Connecticut. How do we think about not what I call fixing the broken system, but really transforming and almost creating a new functional, healthy system that will produce the outcomes that we want?
Yes.
That's the work of the coalition. And we do it through parents, providers, stakeholders, right? We really have a broad approach so that it's not providers who tend to be the ones trying to drive this work and also tend to be the ones ignored,
Yeah.
right? If
Yeah.
we had the right voice, we wouldn't be in the situation we are. So we're using our colleagues and our partners and things like that to help
Mhm.
us. with decision makers.
Yeah. So let's talk about the state of the industry today. So
Yeah.
what are like when you look at where we are and what has formed the basis for how we care for children and
Yeah.
how we do this work in terms of all the regulation and the processes and the restrictions and funding, do you have anything that's kind of your utopia, like one or two or three things that you feel are most important to have in the conversation when you're looking at the state of the industry? What are your top kind of
Yeah.
pillars of where you're trying to affect change?
Yeah. I mean, so the system is so deranged, I will say, that it literally works for no one, right? So your top things are, parents pay too much, so we have to bring down the cost. Teachers make too little, so we have to invest in the system so that we can pay our teachers more. Providers like myself and for-profit places barely survive, right? I mean, it's not a high net worth, industry like profit. So providers make too little. And then, of course, there's the businesses who can't function if the system doesn't work. And then there's the state and local economy. So, like, you could really pick any one of those things. We hyper focus on parents paying too much and teachers making too little.
Yeah.
And the fix there, the requirement that we see is that we have to have state and or federal investments.
Yep.
And those investments have to be at the appropriate true cost of care, not the market, not market cost.
Yes.
Because right now they're trying to fix. So in our state, they're trying to fix it with the market cost in mind, right?
Yeah.
And that's not going to do anything for the health and well-being of the industry long term,
Yeah.
because I can't raise my tuition because parents can't afford anymore. So, and I don't have enough to fundraise anymore, right? That's just not a reasonable solution. So the teachers are really subsidizing the system across our country and
Yes.
everywhere, right? And so we
Mhm.
can't expect that these women who give of themselves are going to be um, the solution, the fix.
Yeah.
That we're going to rest the entire economy on their shoulders and then walk away.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm not sure I answered, but specifically, we're looking for 7% across the state. So parents pay no more than 7%. Teachers make pay parity
Yeah.
with, elementary school teachers. If it's a reasonable, like in some of our towns, even in New Haven and Connecticut, it's not really a reasonable wage. But if it is, we're looking for that, right? Basically, non-poverty wages would be a place to start.
Yep.
Mm. And we are looking to expand our subsidies because so many children who are deserving or needing of subsidies are not getting it because there's
Mhm.
just not there's not enough.
Yeah.
So those are sort of the hyper focused things we're looking at.
Yeah. So the 7% rule, you're basically saying that you're trying to create a structure or a guideline where parents pay no more than 7% of their overall
Household,
wage,
yeah, household income, yeah,
income.
yeah.
Okay.
And
Cool.
that's really modeling after Build Back Better, and really what economists, Janet Yellen did a great report, Economics of Childcare Supply in the United States, and she really outlined, what we're losing as a country, and it's huge. And then she did that work, and then Ready Nation came out with the most recent one where we are losing 122 billion across the country by not having an adequate just 0 to 3 system.
Right.
Of that 122, Connecticut loses 1.5 billion annually. And so when you break that down, it's based on parents being unable to work, so they can't
Yep.
bring income in. Businesses can't be productive, and then the states and local governments can't get taxes on that income. So you have three constituent groups that are losing a tremendous amount of money and impacting the economy and the revenue of the state and the country.
Right.
So we got that number, the 7%, really from that report because it makes a lot of sense, and it's sort of based on research and data, economic data.
Yeah.
Right now, just to give you an idea, 27% is what nationwide families are spending on average of their
Wow.
household income. So
Right.
27 to 7 is really what's reasonable. I mean, think about that.
Wow.
It's silly.
Yeah, that would make such a I can't, I'm thinking about the world. I'm thinking
Yeah.
about the world in this country
Yes.
and like the day-to-day lives of parents having put through two children through childcare. And we had two,
Yeah.
obviously my husband
Me
and I
too.
both worked.
Yeah.
And it's just that kind of like blows. I'm sitting here for a second going 27-7. Wow. That's
Yeah.
like kind of mind blowing.
Yeah.
You know?
And think about what it would mean for just every family, right? It means you can put a down payment on a house. I mean, that
Yeah.
is the difference, right? If
Yeah.
your household, if you're really spending that much of your income, it means that you are saving. It means that you have more to put it back into the economy. So we do these things that are so short-sighted
Yeah.
as decision makers, right? Why don't we see this?
Mhm.
Why can't they? It's really frustrating.
Well, so let's talk a little bit about, the employer-based part
Yeah.
of it. And
Yeah.
so the employer, and this is where Jeff Bezos came in. He's like,
Yeah.
well, I'm going to create the Amazon
Yes.
preschool model,
Yeah.
and I'm going to go to employers
Yeah.
and get a relationship with the employer and a partnership where it can
Yeah.
be partially subsidized for parents, or and a lot of the times even free for parents, because the employer has to
Yeah.
help support this, right?
Yes.
So they're a stakeholder too that I think a lot of us sometimes we forget about how important that they need to be at the table and they need to do their part.
Yeah. And so if you look at Vermont, I mean, Vermont's and it really was able to move legislation through and get to a place where they have a significant new funding source and investment into early care and education because they did exactly what you're saying. They went to the businesses
Yeah.
and they said to them, look, as parents and providers, we've been trying to do this work for hundreds of years and it's not working and it's impacting you. And COVID really created that hyper awareness, right? Like maybe
Yes.
they knew it before, but now it's like, oh, this is real. We actually can't function without our employees. And so they were able, through the business community, to get them to make the fiscal and economic argument to decision makers, and they were listened to. And so now Vermont has new legislation that is by 2027 putting into place new parent payments that reduce it significantly, and that invest the business industry is investing in their system. So it has to be part of the solution. I completely agree.
Mhm.
And in Connecticut, I know our governor is trying to encourage that by offering some tax relief to businesses if they support employees having access to childcare. But it's not creating their own childcare. It's more working with community partners, which I really like that idea. So you don't have these large businesses who sort of start providing childcare that take away from the community childcare
Yes.
programs.
Very much so.
And it also precludes people from not having access because they don't work for, in our case, it's Yale, right? Yale is the huge employer around here
Right.
that Google would be, you know what I mean? So
Yes.
it you sort of would drive people to wanting to work there if that's the
Right.
only place. Whereas if you partner with communities, people can work where they want and can still
Yes.
have that benefit.
It's kind of like healthcare. I mean, you
Yes,
go to
yes,
work for a specific employer and take a job because it offers
yes,
healthcare versus a job you really wanted, but it didn't have healthcare.
exactly. Exactly. And we
So,
actually are using that model when we talk about this in Connecticut.
yeah.
Like this is one way we could go where you're driving people to certain industries and
Yeah.
and taking away. So you're like tipping the balance again to the large sort of corporate side of things.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. Which is not, I would
ideal.
agree. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
not where we want to be.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, we've got these stakeholders, decision makers, lawmakers that need to be at the table when we're try to make these changes, these all important changes. And I feel like a lot of conversation's been happening at the state and federal level,
Yeah.
um, but not a lot of change. Do you think it's because I mean, it's a political football. There wasn't enough, political will to do buy back better. There was, so
Yeah.
politics gets in, and then people, the two sides of the aisle, just like toss it back and forth, and they're like,
Yeah.
"Oh, some future administrator will fix it. We're not going to." And so, do you think it's just nobody actually wants to sit down and listen and actually solve the problem? Like, why do you think that we're still here versus we could have solved this 10 or 15, 20 years ago? So,
Oh, It's
you
so
know?
confusing, right? Because when you speak with, I have yet to meet any side of the aisle, like legislator or decision maker, who says they are against childcare. You know what I
Right.
mean? They
Right.
just, that's not a thing.
Yeah.
What happens, and I really think this is where you get out of sort of politics and decision making and more into culture and values and as a community, as a society, as a country. Why are we still struggling with this?
Yeah.
And so what's really interesting about that Build Back Better is it was 50 years almost to the day when we first had an opportunity under actually Nixon
Mhm.
who to create a completely subsidized early care and education system across our country. And it was passed at that time by the House and the Senate. So we had it, and the Nixon vetoed it. So we had a
Ah,
president then who vetoed it. So now 50 years later, right? So
wow.
much has changed. We now had, the president who wanted it and the House that wanted and the Senate that wanted it, and we couldn't get the House to do it. Right. I mean,
Right.
so but what's fascinating to me is how different the country is, and yet we still have the same arguments about why it shouldn't be done.
Right.
It'll ruin the family. Women should be taking care of children, right? These are the same arguments that Nixon used back then that we
Yes.
heard this time. And what is remarkable to me is the lack of acknowledgement that we are in a completely different economy. You can't have a single household income now.
No.
Anyone that's, I mean, if you're a single parent, you're stuck with that, right? But you struggle. But
Yes.
two families, everyone's working.
Yep.
So there's no one at home to take care of the child, right? Like that's not
Yep.
a reasonable
Well,
thing.
and then they rely on grandparents. That's what,
Right.
a lot of folks are doing because
Yeah,
they
of
can't.
course you have to.
Yeah.
But then the cost of living is completely different. Like the inflation rates that we're managing now. So
Yes.
to expect one parent
Crazy.
to step out of the workforce, and the fact that women now want and are productive members of our economy and our workforce and all these
Yes.
things. The fact that we cannot adjust to that has to be about our like social ingrained belief systems, right? So where is that coming from and how do we shift it?
Yep.
The most the most eye-opening thing that I heard when I was in DC doing some advocacy work from a member of the current um, administration's uh, people was, we need you, meaning myself and the room we were talking to, we need you to provoke demand so that we can get decision makers. This is from the president, right? We can get decision makers to support what we want to do because they actually want to do a huge investment in early care and education.
Right.
So that provoke demand, when you ask the beginning of the question, is like, what do we need to do and why do we need to do it?
Right.
It has to be voters, parents, right? That really force decision makers to do this work.
Yeah.
That's
So
exhausting. We're already
yes,
exhausted, right?
totally. we're,
Frustrating.
we're exhausted doing all the things that you just talked about that are mostly
Yeah.
on women's plates,
Yes.
and
Yes.
leading these ECE companies and trying to do the
Yeah.
best for children. And so now we have to provoke demand too.
Yeah. Yeah. I just find that it's insulting,
Right.
but it's the reality, right? So
Yeah.
that's why the coalition is so critical because
Okay.
we cannot continue to carry the weight ourselves. We have been participating in our own rescue for hundreds of years, and I mean we both as women, but also as the industry, right? And we're 97% female, so like we are the industry.
Yes.
Disproportionately women of color, and so like
Yep.
this is a group that's often underrepresented, marginalized, um, and it's really frustrating
Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
there. So
It is.
the coalition breathes hope and life and camaraderie, and I really encourage. For me, that is a way that I maintain, optimism. In addition to being with little children all day,
Yeah. Exactly.
but
Yeah.
around
Well,
adults.
so I felt the need to also kind of jump in and do whatever I could with regard to what you're talking about, making a difference and raising the issue up, provoking demand in my own way, and having created a group, an advocacy group called Childcare Champions.
Yep.
And we are on Facebook and we meet monthly and we have a steering committee and we have people engaging at the federal level with decision makers in childcare committees, childcare funding related committees, childcare block grant, et cetera. And then at the state level too. So I think everyone who's listening to this podcast just needs to let's all, work together to be part of this movement. I feel, you're highlighting the need for it to be a higher level movement across the United States. And it's going to be women that are going to be the ones carrying the signs and the torches on this. And that's just the way it is. If we can get some guys, great.
Yeah.
But so let's give the listeners some ideas for how to take action in their own communities. And so what would you say that owners, directors, and parents can do to work together in their own communities to bring this issue, to try to continue to be part of the solution and make a difference, make change?
Yeah, so I think there's two pathways and they need to be done at the same, like in parallel. So one is the relationship, right? It's literally finding out who your person is. And in every community, there's a different sort of structure. In our community, your local, like you start with an alder, which is your state person. Then you have your mayor, which is your community person. Then you have your mayor. Then you go to your state level, right? And so inviting all of them to come out to your place and talk them through what's happening for you. That is key, right? So if their lived experience was not, they didn't have to worry about childcare, or it was, 50 years ago. We have some legislators who are in their 70s, right? They don't have any idea of the reality of what's happening now. So I invite them out. They really like to come. Number one, it's nice to be around children and families. It's good for them to be in their communities, right? Yeah. So like if you tell families they're coming and push out some stuff, it helps, they want that exposure as well.
Yes.
So we do that. We have them come in and we have a parent and a teacher and an administrator sit with them, take them on a tour, show them around, and then sit with them and do some high level pieces like this equation doesn't work, right? The system doesn't work. Here's why. And we show them sort of the why, all the things we just talked about, but in a simple way. And that now you've got a relationship. So that's happening on that end. And you keep them apprised, right? Like it's not a one and done. It is showing up to events they may be at. If you see they're going to be at the local festival, I will go and just do a 5-minute, hey, nice to see you again. We're working really hard, that kind of thing. Really would love your support, like a constant reframing of that.
Yeah.
So that's happening on one side.
That's great.
The other side is more of the group, stuff you need to do. We have rallies actually in Connecticut, and we did the first Morning Without Childcare here in Connecticut, which is now the national movement, the Morning Without Childcare.
Right.
And the coalition started that by really coming to a place where we needed to do something where we were including parents, children, and providers coming together, because we're often pitted against each other, right? Yeah. Parents look to me and say things like, this is too expensive. Like we need to pay less. We're already doing a sliding scale. We're already losing money. So I have to have that conversation to inform them about the system and like what's happening. And then they realize that it's actually their legislator that they need to talk to.
Yeah.
So those are the two pathways. And so those public facing things, which you can get coverage. We write a lot of op-eds. That's another thing I would recommend, is thinking about your local paper, letter to the editor, right? Anything like that.
Yeah. Cool. We love those ideas.
Yeah. We also do, who do you know? Like we happen to have someone who is a cousin of someone, who's works for someone, right? It's that kind of thing. So you find those connections.
Yeah.
And that helps as well. So, and it comes from your parents often, those kind of connections.
Mm-hmm. Was last year the first Morning Without Childcare nationally? I think, right?
Yeah. So we did that. We were really excited. that is a win, right? When you have something like that where your impact is felt both locally and then people, so that energy is taken, that's what keeps you coming back, right?
Yes.
Those group events are really critical because
Mhm.
I don't know about you, but the burnout in this work is pretty high because you
Yeah.
have, 3 years of work for one incremental win, right? That's sort of what it's been like. So when you have these social wins and these community wins, it really allows you to keep the work, keep
Yeah.
doing it.
Y Getting your cup refilled so that you
Yeah,
can face
yeah,
another day.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah. Okay, cool. So let's talk about the labor shortage. We all went through this
yeah,
crazy COVID, shift in our workforce and in people's lives wanting to, they just everybody shifted. Everybody decided working from home was fantastic.
yeah,
And then we were dealing with burnout, and then the amazing teachers that stayed with us
yeah,
got super burnout, and leaders, are still facing those high levels of burnout. So
yeah,
that's contributing to the labor shortage, people just leaving the industry
yeah,
altogether, right?
yeah,
Any guidance, advice, insights, things that you've done personally at your school
yeah.
to try to attract more people into the field or
Oh
address
yeah,
the labor?
absolutely. So I love the not I love, but I think it's really important in that framing because the work they're the bedrock, right? Like we can't provide anything without the workforce. And when you talk about a loss, we're 80,000 providers short across the country
Right.
from COVID.
Yeah.
And what's really been interesting to watch is how other industries were able to pivot, right? So you said people want to work from home. Zoom with the baby is not
Yep.
not a thing, right?
It's not a thing.
So, and when you look at other industries that can raise their prices, that and therefore pay their employees more, we can't do that either.
Right.
So, you look at an Amazon or these things where the prices went way up, we can't compete. So we have this really unworkable scenario that we're in. We're kind of like painted into a corner.
Yeah.
Um, and so I always say that, like, necessity is the motherhood of invention, right? So we are painted into a corner and we need to figure out how we can pay our teachers more without raising parent tuition and without having to fundraise anymore. And with the state and federal government not stepping to the table in the way they should. That's really the essential question. So we started thinking about what are the if we can't add more funds to a teacher, what can we take away? What expenses can we remove from their budget so that their salary feels like more? And so we surveyed them and said, what are your four biggest expenses? That was in 2021. So, like, in the middle of right, COVID time. And so at the time, only one teacher owned their own home out of 29 teachers at that time.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, which is just a state of the industry, right? That in and of itself is a state of the industry because we're talking about educators ranging in the age from 22 to 65.
Yep.
Only one owned their own home. So they're unable to build equity in themselves, for their families, that kind of thing,
Mm.
because you don't have a livable wage.
Right.
So rent was obviously the number one cost. So we as an organization decided to think about that and to say, okay, how do we take away rent away from them? We can't pay their rent because if we had the money, we would just pay them more in
More.
salary.
Right.
So we started to partner with some housing advocates and
Mhm.
donors who are really conscious about housing and early care and education. And we decided to purchase homes that, because it's a one time investment that teachers could then live for free.
Mm.
So currently, we have four teachers who are living for free, and we just are in the process of a third home, which will have six as of October, six families living for free. And so their salaries, let's say their salaries are at 40,000, they are now getting a $20,000 benefit, salary benefit through not paying rent. So their salaries in effect went to 60,000.
Right.
It's a huge, huge jump.
Wow.
But for us as an organization, it's a one-time cost. So we can raise those salaries forever. For as long as we own the home, a teacher can live there for free,
Right.
as opposed to having to annually come up with those funds. It's about $125,000 salary benefit right now per year that we are giving to teachers without having to come up with those dollars.
Wow. Wow. So you had private funding, people that are passionate about affordable
Yes.
housing and about early learning come in and help you
Yep.
as benefactors, essentially,
Correct.
to
Yep.
buy ththese homes.
Yep.
And then how do you determine which teachers get the homes?
Yeah, good question. So we employ an because I mean, if you heard me at the beginning, equity is a key focus for us. So we use an equity perspective for this, meaning we look at your income level and your dependents. So right now, all of the people who are living in houses are entry level career people. So they are not at a place where they have been able to get a degree, and they have dependents, meaning they have one, two, three children,
Okay.
and they're single. So that is really just the nature of the initiative because it's an
Right.
equity. The goal, though, and what it does. So if you have a salary savings because you have housing there, you can then invest some of those dollars into other people's salaries. So our salaries have moved up all around, right? And
Wow.
when we hit critical mass, which will be it will have 80 teachers when we're done expanding, and we want to have 24 units. It'll be about 30% of our workforce. We will have a salary savings of about $500,000 a year.
Wow.
That's a significant amount of money to be able to reinvest into our program.
Yes.
Our work now, and you said we have a benefactor. We had to do this as a pilot, right? Our work now is to work with decision makers and create this as a system that is federally or locally um, adopted, so that
Yes.
there's a um, governmental subsidy that comes in. What's exciting about it to me is it can be an alternate funding source. We're trying to get all this money for childcare, and we're looking at the same sources all the time. This could be new. It can be a housing source. It can be bond funds. For a lot of states, they have bond funds where they do infrastructure, one-time dollars, and most critically, it's a one-time cost, not an ongoing cost.
Mhm.
So that's the work now.
So I've spoken to our for-profit friends who are owners that might have 6, 7, 10 sites and thinking about this model
Yep.
for them to pursue, but being more scalable potentially to serve more teachers in like an apartment building type model,
Absolutely. Yeah.
which I think could really work well as well. I know other industries are doing this too. I have a friend that's in the construction industry and he's got
Yes.
housing for all of his employees, et cetera, et
You
cetera.
have
So
to. Yeah.
different models, but yeah.
Yes. So workforce housing is a model.
Okay.
So here's the trick, and this is, when you really want to be intentional about systems. We've had workforce housing in the past. If you sort of, my grandparents' day, like they had the coal miners, right? They'd live in housing. They'd have a store that was set up
Yeah.
through
The
the
company
company.
store. Yeah.
Yeah. So what happens is you really just got paid and it all went back in, right? Because you had the housing and you buy at the store and your wages would go back. So we have to be intentional about this model so that we're not exploiting the workforce
Yes.
yet again,
Yes. Right.
right? So we're already exploiting our workforce, not we're now part of the workforce that's being exploited, but we
Yeah.
don't want to turn into as owners and as leaders of the system.
Yes.
So there are ways to do that, though. I mean, there are
Yeah.
absolutely ways to counterbalance that, and that's where
Mhm.
the intentionality needs to happen.
Mhm.
But to your point, and you said this earlier, which I completely agree with, there is a way to solve this problem. There's so many of us around the country who could each give a piece to solve this problem. There isn't a will. If we wanted this problem solved,
That's
it would
right.
be solved.
That's right.
And that is the most insulting part of it.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's the piece that makes me show up at the green, that makes me, go to the Capitol when there's a rally, because come on, enough already.
Yes. Well, and then sometimes get on my high horse a little bit and put my feminist hat on. And it's like, well, if
Yeah.
there were if all the guys were doing all the
Oh,
childcare work, this would already have been solved.
yes.
Nixon would
Absolutely.
have signed the bill. So
Yes.
anyway, don't get me started.
Yes. Yes.
All right, cool. So you are a very inspiring, smart, well thought out person. You're doing amazing work. Who are your mentors or your personal heroes? Who has helped you become the woman that you are today?
Yeah. So, it's interestingly enough, I was asked this question on another place, and it was very hard for me to answer that. I think the biggest impact for me are my parents and my children, but for I would say different reasons than would normally be said. So I actually grew up in a space that was very unsafe. My parents were not well, and so I was in damaging spaces and
Mm,
situations often. I have a average childhood experience of score of 7. So technically speaking, like I should be a drug addict or an alcoholic, just based on statistics, right?
right.
Um, so what say when I got to a healthy place as an adult and looking back at that time and moved through all that trauma, it was really clear to me that teachers and schools were my safe place.
Mm,
And so they all sort of blend together. I don't really have one particular teacher, but that concept of like someone who cared for me, someone who was there, someone who thought about my well-being, it was all mixed into that teachers and school. So for me, um, as a result of that, like I wanted to create those spaces. I want to make sure that we are there for families who are struggling. If someone had, families who are struggling who could have helped my family and then therefore helped me, but just the teachers who can be that one touchstone for a child who's really in a situation that you may not know what's happening.
yeah.
So there's that side of it, my parents,
Mhm.
right? Because they created spaces where I had to figure stuff out and overcome. And then because of that, I was terrified to have children, right? Like I really wanted to, but I had no idea how to be a parent or like what
Right.
it meant to be loving or stable. So
You didn't really have a healthy blueprint.
I didn't,
Right.
yeah. So I literally because I had such a strong association with school, I went to graduate school. I went to Bank Street College of Education. And so I went to graduate school to learn about children because I was so scared about being a parent. I mean, it was my passion too, but it was like, I think this can help me. So I tried to intellectualize it.
Right.
And then, of course, when my children came about, I had no idea what I was doing. Why isn't this working? Where's the textbook?
Right. Where's the
But I
manual?
Yes, but I did have some knowledge, and I
Yeah.
basically used that knowledge and then led with love, right? And it
Yeah.
worked. So, like, my children are just such an impactful part of my life, and I because I broke patterns from my childhood, and I
Mhm.
have these 2 amazing, loving, sassy, kind, right, like, adult children,
Yeah.
and I think they, along with my, family of origins, had the biggest impact on my life, and I'm
Mhm.
really grateful to them.
Yeah.
So,
Wow, that's very powerful, Allyx. Thank you for sharing that, and
sure.
very vulnerable of you.
Yeah, thank you.
So, and this is Childcare Rockstar Radio. So I often ask, like, what is your definition of a childcare rock star? And I feel like you just kind of described it. It's those teachers, those unsung heroes that
Yes,
came in and they really helped you, form a new path for your life.
absolutely. Yeah, and then when I look at it now, so, like, if I take myself out of the equation and I think about, like, what is a, you know, childcare rock star, I look at the women that I work with and, the amount of shame that we heap on them by putting them in positions where they can't care for their own family, but they're caring for everyone else's.
Ugh,
Um, the way that we don't see them or hear them or value them, they to me are the rock star heroes because they show up for those other children even when society is saying to them, "You're not enough."
yeah.
Like,
Wow.
that is just amazing, and so I work with these women who just inspire me in that way every day.
Yeah. I love that. And through our work, we've impacted or touched about 29,000 teachers.
Oh,
And the most impactful work that I do is helping leaders engage their teachers and love on their teachers
yeah,
and actually see them
yeah,
and let them know that they're being seen and that they're not just some person in a classroom with the
yeah,
door closed dealing with 8 children.
right. Yep. Well, that's so amazing that the impact you've had. And the way we do it, so we sort of formalized it because we found in 2013, so we started, 2009. In 2013 we realized if we didn't formalize it and make it part of our culture and system, it's easy to have that go by the wayside because there's so much other stuff, right? There's so much that so we created something called an emotional well-being program. And it is basically, we have a full-time person who thinks about the emotional well-being of our
Wow.
children, our families, and our staff. And the what that has done from a productivity level, right, is just remarkable. If you can get people to be their best selves, you are going to have a better engagement from everyone involved, right?
Yep.
And that's really the goal. And so it thinks about things like housing and food and well-being, mental, emotional well-being
Yes.
and physical well-being and all those things. And because we're an industry where a lot of if you're not making a livable wage, those things are hard, right? Those things don't come naturally. So
Yes.
we put a lot in place for that.
Wow. I love that. I know a lot of people listening to this podcast are going to write that one down.
Yes. And
That's
reach out. We're happy to we'll share. We have a program. We're happy to share it.
great. I
Yeah.
love that. So how can people find out more about your work and find you? How can they reach
Yeah.
out?
Yeah, so we're at friendcenterforchildren.org. That's a great way to be in touch. And then also there's Childcare for Connecticut's Future.org, which is actually childcareforct.org.
Okay.
So either one of those are great. And then one tool I wanted to share was just I share this everywhere I go if I can, is the First 5 Years Fund. They have a tool where you can look up your legislator. And so it's a
Okay.
great way to find your people.
Okay. First 5 years fund.
Fun. Yeah, it's ffyf.org.
Okay. FFYF. We'll put these links in the show notes, guys.
Great.
Love that. Cool. Well, this has been a phenomenal conversation
fun.
and love uncovering all of these ideas and strategies and resources and things that people can do as action steps to make a difference. And we are fighting for disruption. I feel like
Yes,
that's the title of this episode.
Yeah.
It's, I love it.
Absolutely.
It's very, very cool. Well, thank you so much, Allyx Schiavone, for being with me today on the podcast. I really am very grateful for you, and thanks for doing everything you do to help improve our industry. So I look forward to seeing where you go with your journey, and hopefully being part of it. Maybe you can come to one of our meetings in the future, or do a session, do a talk. Yeah, we'll have to continue figuring out how we can work together.
I would love that. I like to be around my people. So
Yes.
Thank you, Kris, for everything that you do as well. This is
You're
really
welcome.
wonderful.
You're welcome. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in. Very important and powerful episode. Let's go take some action, and we'll talk to you next time. Thanks. Bye-bye. I hope you liked this episode of Childcare Rockstar Radio. If you did, please share it with someone you know and help spread the word to your friends in our industry and on social media. Childcare business success is my passion, and I'm honored to be on this journey with you. As a thank you for listening, learn more about how to grow your business and make more income with our brand new free quiz, the What's My Number One Income Killer quiz, exclusively for preschool and childcare owners. Take the quiz today at childcarequiz.com to discover what your number one income killer is and how to solve it. Take care and God bless.